Welcome and thank you for joining. In this lesson, we'll talk about taxes. We'll start with employment insurance and Canadian pension plan. Before you start working on this lesson, feel free to access the embedded hyperlink, which provides information about how taxation system in Ontario works, and that's explained by people who are specialized in the area. In addition, we'll be using the payroll deductions calculator to help us determine how much tax will be deducted from a paycheck. Before we get started again, we want to go over some terminology or some words that we use very often when discussing taxes, but not as often in our everyday language. So, remember that the taxation system in Ontario is ran by CRA, and CRA stands for, as you might have guessed, Canadian, or C, Revenue Agency. Now, the purpose of Canadian Revenue Agency is to administer tax, benefits, and related programs in order to ensure compliance across Canada. Now, whenever we pay taxes, very often we use the term maximum annual premium. Now, premium means dollars, annual means yearly, and maximum is the top amount that you have to pay for a specific tax deduction. For example, if you are paying employment insurance, you pay a certain percentage, but up to a maximum. And once that maximum is reached, you no longer have to pay employment insurance for that year. So the meaning of the maximum annual premium is the highest premium or the highest amount of money that an insured person, like the worker, needs to pay over the course of 1 year. And that is done in order to keep the insurance policy in place. Now, employment insurance, or EI, provides temporary income to support unemployed workers while they look for employment or they're trying to upgrade their skills. Now, why do we have to pay employment insurance taxes in Canada? Well, we have to pay employment insurance to help financially support the Canadians during their brief periods between jobs so they can focus time and energy in finding their next role or their next career. Now, the next question that is in your mind probably is, well, can I opt out of employment insurance because I have a very safe job and I don't think that I'm ever going to lose the job, and I don't want to change my mind about upgrading myself and moving on or switching career, moving on to the next level or switching careers. Well, if you are self-employed or employed, that would depend. You may opt out, but on the other hand, you have to keep in mind that if you go out of business, you are not eligible for the benefits, for the EI benefits. If you are an employee, though, you cannot opt out of employment insurance. The employers, though, are responsible for deducting the employment insurance premiums from all employees, regardless of their age. So, is it your employer's obligation to pay for EI? Well, yes and no. The employers are responsible to deduct EI premiums out of the employee paycheck, but it is not their responsibility to fully pay for it. Now, do both the employee and the employer pay for the insurance or EI? So, as a matter of fact, yes. And this is what we will be analyzing in the next part of the lesson. So, how does the Canadian employment insurance work? Well, there is a certain rate that is set by Government of Canada about the Canadian employment insurance rate, and this changes year after year to reflect the inflation rates. Now, the rates that you see in here, or the data you see in here, are for the year 2023. The maximum annual insurable earnings is $61,500. So what that means is that you have to pay employment insurance up to, for a salary up to $61,500. So any dollar that you make above $61,500 does not get employment insurance deductions. Now, the rate that applies to employment insurance is 1.63%. And this will work out to $1,002.45. Now, on the other hand, so 1.63%, so if you did the calculations in here, 1.63% of 61,500 means 1.63% is 0.016 of means multiplication 61,500, which amounts to exact amount of $1,002.45. Now, this is the amount that the employee has to pay. So this comes out of the employee paycheck, and it's the maximum amount that an employee can pay. So once you max out your EI, say for example, you have reached a salary of 61,500 by the month of, let's say, August. So in September, October, November, December, you will no longer be deducted employment insurance. Now, in addition to the employee, the employer also has the duty to pay employment insurance for his employees. And the rate that the employers pay is higher than the rate that the employees or the workers pay. And the connection, the relationship is 1.4 times the employee rates. So that works out to be equal to $1,403.43 maximum per year. Now the way this works is this. If the employer pays 1.4 times what the employee pays, it means that the employer will pay 1.4 times 1.63% or 2.28% of the salary of the employee. Now, 2.28% of 61,500, because that's a maximum insurable earning, will work out to be $1,403.33. So what that means is that if you make exactly $61,500, you will pay $1,002.45, and your employer will pay $1,403.43. For any amount above 61,500, you no longer pay EI benefits or EI taxes, and same works for the employer. So I organize these in little buckets because I find them better visuals to help us remember or understand how this works. So I'm going to say that the maximum amount the employer pays is $1,403.33. The maximum that the employee pays is 1.63% of 61,500 or $1,002.45, which means that this bucket can only fit $1,002.45. Anything above it is going to come to the employer's pocket, the employee's pocket. Gosh. So, as for the employer, he will pay 2.28% of 61,500, which means that in total, the employer will pay $1,403.43 maximum. So anything that is exceeding this amount will go into the employer's pocket, or let's say that there will be no money coming out of his pocket. So let's practice this in these two examples. Suppose that your salary is $45,000 per year. Now remember that 61,500 is the maximum, and this is lower than the maximum, which means that the employee will be paying 1.63% of 45,000, and that will amount to 0.0163 multiplied by 45,000. Let's see how much this is. And I'm just going to use a calculator here on the side. 0.0163 times 45,000 is $733.50. So as you can see here, this amount is lower than the maximum that you have to pay in a year, which means that this will be the total amount that the employee pays. The employer, on the other hand, has to pay 1.4 times more than this. So you can find it by simply multiplying this by 1.4. So let's try to do it by multiplying by 1.4 times 733.50, which will amount to $1,026.90. As you can see here, this amount is lower than the maximum amount that an employer can pay or has to pay. Another way of finding out how much the employer will have to pay is by taking 2.28%. So 2.28% of 45,000, which is your salary. So that would be 0.0228 multiplied by 45,000. And that amounts to, let's take a look, 1,026.90. So as you can see in here, we calculated in two different ways and we get the same amount. So use whichever way is easier for you. So in total, the amount of taxes that are paid for a 45,000 salary in employment insurance we're talking about, I'm going to write that down here, would be equal to 733.50, which is what the employee pays, plus 1,026.90, which equals, let's do the math, plus 733.50. So in total, the government will be receiving $1,760.40 for a salary of 45,000. Okay, oops, this way. Okay, now let's take a look at the next example. Now, in the next example, we have a salary of $150,000 per year. So the employee will pay, we said, 1.63%. So 1.63% of 150,000. So which means that this will be 0.0163 times 150,000. So let's multiply 0.0163 times 150K. I go $2,445. And when I look at the maximum amount that an employee can pay, I can see this is a lot greater than the maximum. So what that means is that in this case, the employee will pay just the maximum, so 1,245. So this is greater than the maximum premium. The maximum EI premium is $1,002.45. Therefore, the employee will pay just the maximum, right? Even though the 1.63%, right, will give you 2,445, he doesn't have to pay that because he has reached the maximum probably halfway the year. So another way of approaching this is by simply looking at the salary. So the maximum insurable earning is $61,500. If the salary is $150K, which is more than double the maximum insurable earnings, that means that we just have to go with the maximum. So that's another way of approaching answering this question. Now, the employer, on the other hand, again, since the salary is more than $61,500, so it's $150K, it means that the employer will pay the maximum of $1,403.43. So that's the maximum EI premium that is paid by the employer. And that is because, again, the amount here is higher than the insurable earnings. So that means that in total, for a salary of 150,000, from this paycheck will be deducted $1,002.45 from the employee and $1,403.33 from the employer, and that will amount to 1,002.45 plus 1,403.33, so $2,405.78. So that's the total amount of money that the government will deduct from a salary or a paycheck of $150,000 per year. So next, we'll move on to Canadian Pension Plan. So CPP is an acronym for Canadian Pension Plan. Now, the reason why we need to pay CPP is because it provides Canadians with earnings while they are no longer in the market, so they're no longer working. Now, can you opt out of CPP? The answer to this is no. We need to pay CPP because we need money even when we are unable to work, so when we get old. So is it your employer's obligation to pay for CPP? Well, it will be the employer's and employee's obligation. So both the employer and the employee will pay for it. And the employee. Okay, so provides income when retired. Okay, now these are the rates for Canadian Pension Plan for the year 2023. This is how Canadian Pension Plan works. So the contribution rate is 5.95% of your gross salary. Gross salary is when there are no taxes deducted, so the total amount. Net salary is whatever is left out of once you pay all the taxes. Now, both the employee and the employer will pay the same percentage. The maximum employee contribution is 5.95%, and the maximum employee premium is $3,754.45, which means that once you've reached this amount, you no longer have to contribute to Canadian Pension Plan. The same thing works for the employee, so 5.95%, which amounts to $3,754.45. That means that the total maximum CPP annual premium is the sum of whatever the maximum of the employee is plus whatever the maximum of the employer is, which means that we're adding here $3,754.45 to $3,700.54.45. So you stop paying CPP when the employee and employer reaches the maximum of the premium contributions. Now let's take a look at how this works. Suppose that your salary is $45,000 per year. So that means that you will be paying 5.95% of 45,000. So that is 0.0595 multiplied by 45,000. So let's multiply 0.0595 times 45,000 is 2,677.50. Now, because both employee and the employer pay the same percentage, it means that the employer will also pay $2,677.50. So, in total, both the employee and the employer will pay double of $2,677.50, which will amount to $5,355. Now, another thing you want to check is whether you have passed or you have exceeded the premium. 3,754 is the premium. This is lower than the premium, which means that you got to pay that full amount. Now let's take a look at the next example. You make 150K a year. Calculate CPP. So you're going to say, 5.95% of $150,000 will tell me exactly how much I have to pay. So that means 0.595 times 150,000 equals, let's take a look, $8,925. Wait a second. I was told that there is a maximum premium. How much is that? $3,754.45. So this amount is way greater, which means that this person here that makes 150K has maxed out the premium of $3,754.45. So this is greater. So way like halfway the year or less than that. So because this is greater than the $3,754, I'll make this red. And 50 cents, 50 or 55? 45, yes. And 45 cents. So therefore, so the amount that the employee pays is $3,754.45. Now, because the employer pays the same amount and maxes out at the same amount, we're going to say that the employer will also pay the maximum insurable earning, $54.45, and the total will be whatever is paid by the employee plus whatever is paid by the employer, or you can just double one of the or the other. I'm just going to add this time the two amounts. It's the same thing, right? 54.45, and the total would be 3,754.45. $7,508.90. Okay, so you have a couple of practice questions for EI and CPP. I invite you to complete both questions. So calculate the EI and CPP by both employee and the employer when the salary is $45,000 and when the salary is $150,000. I hope that this lesson was interesting and you found some of the information interesting and probably new, probably old. And I would like to thank you for learning with me again. Bye for now.